The night New York refused to sleep, sirens sliced through the rain like blades of panic. Inside the back of an ambulance, Grace Miller was bleeding out while fighting to bring 3 tiny lives into the world. Her hands were trembling, her lips pale, and every contraction felt like lightning burning through her chest. "You have to breathe, Grace," the paramedic begged. "For them." She tried, but her heart monitor screamed betrayal. At New York Presbyterian's emergency bay, the doors burst open. Nurses shouted codes while one of them pressed on Grace's abdomen to keep the babies safe a few more seconds. Her sister Hannah ran alongside the gurney, clutching Grace's phone. She whispered through tears, "Jake's on his way." He promised. But Jake Rowan, the so-called father of the triplets, wasn't running through any hospital corridor. He was in a Manhattan rooftop bar, half drunk, holding an iPhone toward his face, recording a live stream. "Tonight's the night, everyone," he shouted over the music. "3 babies. I'm about to be a legend." The crowd cheered, glasses clinking. No one knew that the mother of those babies was dying 3 miles away. In the hospital's chaos, Dr. Sophia Patel, the cardiologist on call, glanced at the chart and froze. "Severe peripartum cardiomyopathy," she whispered. "Her heart can't handle this." But there was no time to talk. The first baby's head had crowned. Grace screamed once, then went silent. The monitor flatlined for half a second. Nurses gasped. Hannah screamed, "Don't you dare leave them!" 3 cries broke the room one after another. First a boy, then a girl, then another boy. The sound was wild, desperate, alive. But their mother's silence swallowed it whole. Dr. Patel pressed the defibrillator paddles to Grace's chest. Clear. Electricity cracked through the air. Grace's body jolted, then fell still again. The monitor twitched, sputtered, then drew a weak rhythm. "We've got her," Dr. Patel whispered. "For now." Meanwhile, Jake was posing for selfies, the city skyline of Manhattan behind him, telling his followers he'd name the babies after stars. "Miles, Eden, and Theo," he slurred. "Has a ring, doesn't it?" He didn't notice the call that came in at that exact moment, from Hannah, marked urgent. He declined it with a lazy thumb. At 3 a.m., a black Mercedes S-Class pulled up under the hospital canopy. Adrian Hales stepped out, sharp suit, no tie, rain slicking his hair. Billionaire, founder of Hale Systems, the man who once loved Grace Miller back in college before walking away to chase his empire. He'd seen the rooftop live on social media, and something in him snapped. He was the man who never acted too late, until her. Now he was here. In the waiting area, Hannah looked up and froze. "Adrian?" He nodded once. "Where is she?" When Dr. Patel told him they needed a legal spouse to approve an experimental heart device that might save Grace, Hannah's face broke. Jake was unreachable. "Then find someone who will," Adrian said, voice cold, eyes burning. "She's not married," the doctor reminded him. Adrian took a slow breath, rainwater still running down his coat. "Then I will be." He reached for the clipboard. His hands didn't shake. Not this time. Outside, the city hummed under the storm, and the digital billboard above the hospital flashed Jake's viral post. #triplet legend. Inside, a man was about to marry a dying woman to save her heart. And that's when everything truly began. The city was still drenched when Adrian Hale followed Dr. Patel down the sterile hallway toward the intensive care unit. Every fluorescent light buzzed like static in his ears. Through the glass, Grace lay motionless, tubes everywhere, her skin the color of paper. Machines breathed for her. Her chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, tethered to a whirring pump that looked more mechanical than merciful. Adrian's throat closed. He had seen mergers collapse, fortunes burn, but nothing like this kind of fragility. "She has hours, maybe less," Dr. Patel said. "Her heart's failing faster than the meds can stabilize it. The LVAD could keep her alive until a transplant, but we need immediate consent." Hannah wiped her nose with a trembling hand. Her boyfriend, Jake, he's the father, but he won't answer his phone. He's too busy making videos. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Then there's no one left to sign?" "Only a legal spouse," the doctor said softly. Something cracked open inside him. He turned to Hannah. "Grace once told me she believed love was doing what was needed, not what was easy." Hannah blinked through tears. "You loved her?" He nodded. "Still do." The rain outside thickened into sheets. Hannah hesitated, then whispered, "She'd trust you. Do it." By 3:40 a.m., the 3 of them were in the hospital chapel, a small, forgotten room with flickering candles and an old wooden cross. The janitor, half asleep, stood as witness. Hannah's phone flashlight served as light for the license form she'd pulled up online. Adrian signed his name with a borrowed blue pen that left a smudge on his cuff. He didn't care. Dr. Patel countersigned as officiant, her voice steady but eyes damp. By the authority vested in me under emergency medical law, I pronounce you husband and wife. No music, no rings, no promises except one: keep her alive. Adrian pressed his forehead to Grace's cold hand afterward. You don't know it yet, he whispered, but you're my wife. Then he turned to the surgical team. Do it, save her. Within minutes, Grace was wheeled into the operating room again. Hannah trailed behind, whispering prayers. Adrian stood outside the double doors, suit soaked, heart hammering harder than any boardroom pitch he'd ever made. Through the window, he watched Dr. Patel's team move like dancers under pressure. One surgeon inserting the cannula, another priming the pump, nurses calling out numbers. The LVAD machine hummed to life, its sound like a second heartbeat. Across town, Jake finally answered his phone at a nightclub after last call. Hospital? He slurred. She's fine, relax. Then he laughed. Man, my followers love this story. 3 kids, I'm a damn celebrity. He didn't notice the comments turning on him. Where's the mom? Why are you drinking? Is she even alive? Back in the waiting area, Hannah scrolled through social media, her face pale. He's trending, she whispered. He's turning her dying into a hashtag. Adrian didn't respond. His focus stayed on the surgical door, on the faint rhythm coming from inside. At 5:15 a.m., Dr. Patel emerged, mask pulled down, eyes tired but bright. The device is in. She made it through the night. Hannah broke down, sobbing. Adrian exhaled for the first time in hours. She'll need months of rehab, the doctor added. And peace. No stress, no noise. Adrian nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure the world goes silent for her. He looked at the woman behind the glass, wires glinting like threads of fate, and whispered, You'll wake up, Grace, and when you do, I'll tell you the truth, how the man who once walked away became your husband in the rain. Outside, the sun began to rise over Manhattan, and with it, a war neither of them could yet see coming. The morning after the emergency surgery, the ICU smelled of antiseptic and dawn. Machines hummed like restless insects. Grace Miller lay still, pale beneath the sheets, her chest rising gently with the rhythm of the LVAD device pumping inside her. Her heart had become half human, half machine. Dr. Patel checked the monitors, nodded once, then whispered, She's stable for now. Hannah sat nearby, a paper cup of cold Starbucks coffee trembling in her hands. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Every so often, she would lift her phone, scrolling through the chaos online, Jake's face flashing across every tabloid post. Triplet dad celebrates while mom fights for life. Comments filled the screen. Is this real? That billionaire guy's involved now. Poor woman. Hannah threw the phone aside. He turned her suffering into a circus, she muttered. Adrian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the skyline brighten over the Hudson. He looked like he hadn't moved since the night before. The rain had stopped, but his expression hadn't changed. She doesn't deserve this noise, he said quietly. I'll fix it. Downstairs, a hospital publicist was already fielding calls. News vans lined the street. Jake had sold an exclusive statement to a gossip blog, claiming he'd been pushed aside by the rich. The article showed him smiling beside a glass of champagne, calling himself the real dad. He promised to tell all when the time was right. Dr. Patel entered with a clipboard. We can't have this media chaos here. Grace needs rest. And those babies, she hesitated. They're still in NICU. 2 are under oxygen. 1 has jaundice. They'll be there for weeks. Hannah swallowed. Can she see them? Not yet, the doctor said softly. But we can bring photos. Adrian nodded. I'll handle that. Within an hour, he was in the neonatal unit, his tall frame oddly gentle among the incubators. 3 tiny bodies slept under blue lights, wires taped to their skin. A nurse smiled faintly. They're fighters, just like their mom. Adrian stared at them, awestruck. He reached out but didn't touch, afraid even his shadow could break them. Miles, he whispered to the smallest boy. Eden, he smiled faintly at the girl. Theo. The names Jake had announced online. They felt wrong now, tainted by arrogance. Still, they were hers. He took soft photos with his iPhone, careful not to disturb the light. Later, in Grace's room, he laid the pictures beside her hand. They're waiting for you, he said, and they already look stubborn. Her eyelids flickered. For one breathtaking second, she stirred. Hannah jumped up. "Grace?" The monitors beeped faster. Grace's lips parted. Her voice was a broken whisper. "The babies?" "They're alive," Adrian said instantly. "All three." A tear rolled from the corner of her eye. "Good," she murmured, then drifted back under. The nurse smiled softly. "She heard you." Outside in the corridor, Jake finally showed up. Dark glasses hung over, pretending to care. "So, she made it, huh?" he said, trying to sound heroic. "Guess I'll go in." Hannah blocked his path. "She doesn't need you right now." He smirked. "I'm the father." Adrian stepped closer, his voice calm but cutting. "You're the reason she almost died." Jake laughed, backing away. "Oh look, the billionaire knight. You think you own her now?" "No," Adrian said softly. "But I married her to save her life. That's more than you ever did." Jake's smile faltered for the first time. "You did what?" And for the first time, the man who thought he'd won realized the game had already changed. Jake Rowan froze in the middle of the ICU hallway, his sunglasses sliding down his nose as the words sank in. "You married her?" he repeated, voice rising with disbelief. Nurses turned their heads. Hannah stepped between them, her body trembling with exhaustion but her eyes steady. "You weren't here," she said coldly. "She was dying, and someone had to sign." Jake barked out a laugh, ugly and hollow. "Oh, that's rich. So the billionaire swoops in, plays hero, and suddenly he's her husband?" Adrian didn't flinch. "No one played anything. The doctors needed consent. You were busy selling headlines." Jake's smirk cracked into something darker. "You think you can just buy your way into her life? You think she'd ever want that?" "She wanted to live," Adrian said quietly, "and now she has that chance." For a moment, no one moved. Then Jake shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and stalked away. His phone was already buzzing, notifications from followers, gossip sites asking for more quotes. He smiled to himself. "If the rich boy wants war, I'll give him a show." Inside Grace's room, the machines beeped in patient rhythm. Adrian sank into the chair beside her bed. For the first time, he let himself touch her face, just a light brush over her temple. The warmth beneath his fingers was fragile but real. "You're safe now," he whispered, "and I'll protect what's yours, even if the world calls it madness." Dr. Patel entered quietly. "Mr. Hale, she'll wake in a few days, maybe less. But there's something you should know." She hesitated. "The surgery saved her life, but recovery will be brutal. She'll need months of rehab. The LVAD is a bridge, not a miracle." "I understand," he said. "Good. Then you should also understand that stress can kill her faster than the disease ever could." Adrian nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep the stress outside these walls." That night, the hospital was wrapped in a strange quiet. Rain tapped against the windows, softer now, almost like breathing. Hannah had gone to the NICU to check on the babies. Adrian remained by Grace's side, the faint whir of the LVAD filling the silence between them. He took out his phone, scrolled through messages from his assistant, board meetings, press questions, investors demanding statements. He ignored them all. For once, the empire could wait. Meanwhile, Jake sat in a 24-hour diner, face lit by the cold glow of his iPhone. He was drafting a new post. "Rich guy steals my wife while she's unconscious. Justice for Jake." He could already imagine the comments, the sympathy, the interviews. "They'll eat this up," he muttered. The waitress poured coffee without a word. She'd seen too many men like him, loud, hollow, desperate to be seen. Back at the hospital, Grace stirred again. Her lips parted. A faint sound escaped. Adrian leaned forward. "Grace?" Her eyes fluttered open just a fraction, unfocused, confused. "Where? The babies?" she whispered. "They're safe," he said softly. "They're beautiful. You'll see them soon." Her gaze drifted to his hand holding hers, to the ring on his finger. A frown creased her forehead. "Ring?" He hesitated, then answered honestly. "We were married so they could save you. You don't have to understand now. Just rest." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Married?" she murmured, voice fading into the hum of the machine. Adrian bowed his head, whispering, "Yes, Grace, but someday I want to earn it for real." Outside the glass, the first flashbulbs lit the parking lot, because the world had just found out who her new husband was. By sunrise, Grace Miller's story had gone viral across America. Every morning show ran her photo, frail, unconscious, a tangle of hospital wires beside the glowing faces of 3 newborns. The captions were brutal. "Dying mother saved by billionaire CEO. Love triangle in the ICU. Who is Adrian Hale?" Inside New York Presbyterian, reporters crowded the front lobby. Flashbulbs exploded each time an elevator dinged. Adrian Hale's name had drawn more attention than any press release his company had ever produced. His assistant called from Hale Systems headquarters. "We need a statement before the stock opens." Adrian's voice was flat. No statement. Not one word about her. Hannah slipped through the crowd, clutching a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches she hadn't touched. "They're outside the NICU too," she whispered. "Photographers, nurses are furious." Adrian rubbed his temples. "I'll handle it." He called his legal team. Within an hour, the hospital released a formal notice: privacy violation, trespassing, prosecution if repeated. It slowed the chaos, but only slightly. Meanwhile, Jake Rowan was in his apartment in Queens, sitting shirtless on a couch littered with empty beer cans and his open MacBook. His video from the diner had hit 500,000 views overnight. "My baby mama was stolen by a billionaire while I was fighting for my family," he'd said into the camera, fake tears shining. The comments were a war zone. Some called him a hero, others a fraud. Jake loved the attention anyway. "Keep talking," he muttered. "Every click pays." At the hospital, Grace was breathing better. The LVAD hummed like a clock beneath her ribs, steady and patient. Dr. Patel checked her vitals and smiled faintly. "Her numbers are improving," she told Adrian, "but emotionally she'll wake to a world she doesn't recognize." "She'll have me," he said simply. That afternoon, Adrian sat by her bedside, scrolling through a folder of photos he'd taken of the triplets, each one wrapped in soft cotton hats. He placed a printed copy of the three of them on her nightstand. "They're waiting, Grace," he whispered. "But don't rush, heal first." Hours later, as sunlight bled through the blinds, Grace opened her eyes fully for the first time. Confusion swam behind them. "Where am I?" she croaked. "You're safe," Adrian said, standing quickly. "The surgery worked." Her gaze fell on him, then on the ring again. "You're my husband?" He hesitated. "On paper, but only so the doctors could save you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't even remember saying yes." "You didn't have to," he said softly. "It wasn't about permission, it was about survival." Before she could respond, Hannah entered, holding a tablet with a shaky smile. "Do you want to see them?" On the screen, 3 tiny faces filled the frame. One yawned, another stretched its fingers like it was waving. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "They're perfect," she whispered. Adrian watched her, something breaking quietly inside him. She wasn't the fragile nurse he remembered from years ago. She was a warrior who had walked through hell to give life. But the peace shattered when a nurse rushed in. "Mr. Hale, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet showing a live morning broadcast. Jake, standing on the hospital's steps, microphones crowding his face. He was shouting into the cameras. "That billionaire thinks he owns my family. He bought my wife while she was dying. I'll get my kids back, you'll see." Grace flinched, her heart rate spiking. Dr. Patel rushed in, shouting for calm. Adrian dropped the tablet and leaned close to her. "Ignore him. He can't touch you anymore." But deep down, he knew Jake wasn't finished, and the real fight was just beginning. Grace Miller had survived the impossible, but the world outside her hospital room had turned into something she couldn't control. When she awoke 3 days later, the faint hum of her LVAD was the first sound she recognized. The second was the muffled chatter of reporters echoing from the street below. Her body felt foreign. Tubes, wires, machines, the rhythm of her own heart now shared with metal. Hannah sat beside her, holding her hand. "Don't move too fast," she whispered. "You're safe. The babies are okay." Grace tried to smile but stopped when pain shot through her chest. "And Jake?" she asked weakly. Hannah looked away. "You should focus on getting better." Outside the glass doors, Adrian Hale was on a phone call, his voice sharp but low. "I don't care how much it costs. Take every video down, every clip, every headline that mentions her name." His assistant replied, panicked. "They're spreading faster than we can remove them, sir. The story's everywhere." Grace could see his reflection through the glass, tall, immaculate, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in boardrooms, not hospital corridors. When he noticed her watching, he ended the call and entered the room quietly. "You're awake," he said softly. She blinked at him. "You really married me?" He nodded. "To save your life. And now the whole country thinks I'm part of some scandal." Her voice cracked, anger rising with fear. "They're calling me a gold digger, a liar. I saw it on TV before they shut it off. Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't owe anyone an explanation. But it's my face everywhere, she whispered. My baby's names, my life. He turned it into entertainment. Dr. Patel entered with her chart, breaking the tension. Grace, your vitals are improving, but I need you calm. Stress can damage the LVAD. She glanced at Adrian. You both need rest. When the doctor left, Grace stared at the ceiling. Why would Jake do this? Adrian hesitated, then said quietly, because he needs attention more than he ever needed you. That night, while the city glittered outside, Grace couldn't sleep. The machines ticked like restless thoughts. In her mind, flashes of memory tangled together. Jake laughing at a bar, promising he'd change, the hospital lights blinding her, Adrian's voice saying, I'll save her. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt the hum of the device that was keeping her alive. Hannah returned with updates from the NICU. They're gaining weight, she said softly, showing pictures. Theo already opened his eyes. Grace smiled through tears. I need to see them. Soon, Hannah promised. Dr. Patel says maybe next week. When Hannah left, Adrian remained. He set a small white box on the bedside table, a Tiffany rattle wrapped in tissue paper. A gift, he said. Not from me, from Dr. Patel. Grace opened it carefully, tracing the tiny silver handle. It's beautiful, she murmured. Everything feels too beautiful and too broken at the same time. Adrian sat beside her. You don't have to understand all this now. Just know that I'm not leaving. She turned her head to him, studying his face as if trying to remember the man he once was. You really didn't have to do this. He met her eyes. Grace, I've spent my whole life fixing what money can fix, but I couldn't fix losing you once. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Before she could respond, Hannah burst back in, breathless. Jake's outside, she gasped. He brought a camera crew. He's trying to get into the NICU. Adrian stood, his expression turning to steel. Not tonight. And as he walked out to face the chaos, Grace finally understood. Her survival had started a war. By the time Adrian Hale reached the hospital entrance, the crowd had doubled. Camera flashes cut through the night like lightning. Reporters shouted his name, microphones thrust forward, the air thick with questions that sounded more like accusations. Mr. Hale, did you marry her for publicity? Is it true you took another man's family? Are you the baby's real father? Adrian ignored them and walked straight toward Jake Rowan, who was standing on the steps with his trademark smirk, a microphone in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Look who finally showed up, Jake sneered. The billionaire husband. How's my wife doing tonight? She's not your wife, Adrian said evenly, and you're not coming inside. Jake laughed, the sound ugly and hollow. You think you can just erase me? I'm the father. Those babies have my blood. You can't keep me from them. Adrian stepped closer, his tone low and sharp. You sold your story to tabloids while she was dying. You forfeited your right to call yourself anything. For a brief moment, the crowd hushed. The two men stood inches apart, one calm, one vibrating with rage. Jake's face flushed red. You think your money makes you the hero? She'll wake up and remember who she really loved. Adrian didn't flinch. Maybe, but when she does, she'll also remember who showed up when you didn't. Security arrived, forming a barrier. Jake shoved a cameraman and yelled, "This isn't over," before storming off into the flashing chaos. Adrian watched him go, expression unreadable, then turned to the security chief. No one gets near the NICU. No cameras, no visitors without clearance. When he returned upstairs, Hannah was pacing outside the nursery window. Inside, 3 tiny lives glowed beneath blue light, each in their separate incubator. She looked up as Adrian approached. They almost let him through. She whispered, still shaking. One of the guards didn't know who he was. Not anymore, Adrian said quietly. I'm increasing protection, private security, 2 shifts, no exceptions. Hannah exhaled shakily. You shouldn't have to do this alone. I'm not, he said. You're here. A nurse opened the NICU door slightly. She's asking for you, she said softly. Grace, she's awake again. In the dim room, Grace lay propped up, color returning to her cheeks. I heard shouting, she murmured as Adrian sat beside her. He was here, wasn't he? Yes, Adrian admitted, but he's gone now. She looked away. He won't stop. Jake doesn't lose, he gets even. Adrian leaned forward, voice steady. Then we'll be smarter. He's playing for attention, we'll play for truth. Grace met his gaze, studying him. You sound like you're planning a war. I am, he said, because you and those babies deserve peace. Later that night, the hospital halls fell quiet again. Grace dozed in her room while Hannah rocked in a chair outside, phone in hand. The internet was exploding. Jake had posted another video titled "The Billionaire Who Stole My Family." His followers were multiplying by the hour. Adrian watched the numbers climb and made one decision. He would use his own power, his own influence, not to destroy Jake, but to control the narrative. He called his lawyer, Maya Chen, a legend in corporate crisis law. "Meet me at the hospital by morning," he said. "It's time to protect Grace legally before this turns into a circus." As he hung up, he glanced once more through the NICU glass. The babies slept, tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. For the first time in days, Adrian smiled faintly. "You'll never know the noise outside," he whispered. But outside those walls, Jake was already planning his next move, and this time he wouldn't come alone. By dawn, the sky above Manhattan was bruised gray. Adrian Hale hadn't slept. He sat in the hospital cafeteria, untouched coffee beside his laptop, scrolling through legal filings drafted overnight. Across the table, attorney Maya Chen, sharp in a navy blazer, reviewed the documents with the precision of a surgeon. "You weren't exaggerating," she said flatly. "He's already sold image rights of the babies to 3 different outlets. All illegal without parental consent." Adrian rubbed his forehead. "Can we stop it?" "We can do better," Maya replied. "We'll hit him where it hurts, custody and credibility. By the time I'm done, no judge in this city will believe a word that comes out of Jake Rowan's mouth." At that moment, Hannah rushed in, eyes wide. "Grace is awake, and she's asking for you." They found her sitting upright, pale but lucid, her hair a messy halo. She looked fragile and fierce all at once. "I saw him on TV," she said softly. "Jake? He said he's fighting for his family. Is that what this is now? A fight?" Adrian hesitated. "He's turned your story into a brand. Maya's handling it." Grace frowned. "Maya Chen, the corporate lawyer?" "I'm more than that," Maya said from the doorway, voice cool. "I protect people from predators who wear smiles." Grace tried to sit taller. "I don't want war. I want peace for my children." Maya nodded. "Then let me clean the mess while you heal. Stay silent for now. Let the truth speak later." Outside, the hospital courtyard buzzed with more reporters. Jake's team was staging a charity event to spin his image, photographers snapping as he handed coffee cups to volunteers, wearing a shirt that read #Fight for Jake's Kids. In a quiet boardroom upstairs, Maya connected her MacBook to a projector, showing Jake's timeline of posts. "This is defamation, manipulation, and emotional abuse disguised as PR," she said. "We'll file an emergency injunction, and if he steps within 50 feet of Grace or the NICU, he'll be in cuffs." Adrian watched silently, impressed. She reminded him of himself. Controlled, methodical, dangerous when cornered. By midday, the hospital had tightened its security. Every visitor was checked twice. Camera crews were blocked at the gates. Grace was finally allowed a brief visit to the NICU. Wrapped in a sterile gown, she stepped into the softly lit room, where 3 incubators glowed like small suns. The nurse smiled. "They know your voice. Talk to them." Grace's voice trembled as she whispered, "Hi, my loves. I'm your mom." The smallest baby twitched, tiny fingers curling. Tears blurred her vision. "I almost didn't make it," she whispered, "but you did. So I will too." From behind the glass, Adrian watched quietly, arms crossed, emotion flickering across his composed face. For a man who'd built empires from algorithms, this, 1 mother, 3 babies, felt more powerful than anything money had ever bought. Later, as the day faded, Maya received a call from her paralegal. She listened, expression hardening. "He filed for custody," she said finally. Grace looked up, stunned. "He what?" "Jake Rowan is suing for full custody on grounds of unfit mother, claiming you're unstable, dependent on machines, and married to a man for financial gain." Grace's face went pale. "He's lying." Maya closed her laptop calmly. "Lies don't matter when the headlines love them, but we'll dismantle him piece by piece." Adrian reached for Grace's hand. "He's trying to break you because you scare him. He doesn't know the kind of strength you have now." Grace stared at her reflection in the window, thin, scarred, alive, and whispered, "Then I'll show him." Because for the first time since waking, she wasn't just surviving, she was preparing to fight back. 2 days later, the war Jake Rowan had started finally reached a courtroom. Grace Miller, still recovering, sat in a wheelchair beside her lawyer, Maya Chen. The sterile corridors of New York County Family Court smelled faintly of coffee and fear. Adrian Hale stood behind her, silent but towering, his presence radiating calm strength. Jake arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a navy suit that still looked wrinkled from the night before. His new manager carried a camera, pretending it was off. The judge's clerk confiscated it before they could sit. Jake smirked anyway. "Smile, sweetheart," he whispered toward Grace. "You'll thank me when the world hears your side." Grace didn't answer. She was too busy trying to keep her heart steady, feeling the LVAD hum beneath her ribs. Every beat reminded her she was alive for a reason bigger than him. Maya leaned down, voice low. "Don't look at him. Look at me. I'll do the fighting." The courtroom filled quickly. Journalists, spectators, even a blogger live tweeting from the second row. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, entered and immediately silenced the noise. "This is not a movie," she said firmly. "If anyone records, they'll spend the night in jail." Jake's lawyer stood, young and arrogant. "Your Honor, my client only wants access to his children. He believes Ms. Miller is currently unfit due to her medical condition, emotional instability, and questionable marriage to Mr. Hale, who, by the way, stands to gain enormous public goodwill through this union." Maya rose slowly. "Your Honor, my client almost died giving birth to those children while Mr. Rowan was live streaming from a bar. He has since sold private photos, violated medical privacy laws, and monetized tragedy for clicks." She slid a folder across the table. Exhibit A, bank deposits from tabloid outlets totaling $72,000. Jake's jaw clenched. "That's not what it looks like." "Oh," Maya's voice sharpened, "because it looks like you turned your children into currency." A murmur rippled through the court. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Rowan, are you currently employed?" Jake hesitated. "Influencer," he said finally. The judge blinked. "That's not a job title." Laughter rippled, quickly hushed. Maya pressed on. "And here's Exhibit B, text messages threatening Ms. Ruff Miller's sister for refusing to give him access to the newborn's photos." Jake's face reddened. "Those were jokes." The judge's tone turned icy. "Do you consider threatening your children's aunt a joke?" Silence. Jake looked at the floor. Grace felt a tremor of relief for the first time. She turned to Maya. "Thank you," she whispered. Maya nodded subtly but didn't smile. "We're not done." Then came the bombshell. Maya called an unexpected witness, Cole Bennett, a journalist. He rose from the back of the courtroom, holding a manila envelope. "Your Honor," he said clearly, "I have recordings of Mr. Rowan negotiating exclusive custody interviews with a media company for profit. He refers to his children as the brand." Gasps filled the room. Jake lunged forward. "You set me up." The judge banged her gavel. "Enough." She flipped through the exhibits, then looked directly at Grace. "Miss Miller, you are recovering from a life-threatening condition. The court recognizes your vulnerability, but also your commitment. Temporary custody remains solely with you. Mr. Rowan, you will have supervised visits after a full psychological evaluation." Jake's mouth opened, then closed. He'd lost the first round. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited, but Adrian blocked their path, shielding Grace with his coat. "No questions," he said, voice calm but final. Grace looked up at the gray sky. "I just want peace," she whispered. Adrian's hand tightened around hers. "Then we'll build it, one truth at a time." But behind them, Jake's manager was already dialing another number. The story wasn't over, just moving to a darker stage. The court's decision didn't end the chaos. It only redirected it. Within 24 hours, Jake's manager had leaked the ruling to gossip blogs, spinning the story as if Grace Miller had used her billionaire husband to buy the judge. Hashtags exploded across social media. "Justice for Jake" trended by midnight. Grace's photo, frail, clutching her chest in the wheelchair, circulated like a weapon. The internet had turned her survival into scandal again. Inside the penthouse apartment that Adrian had rented near Central Park, Grace sat in silence, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The lights of Manhattan shimmered like a restless sea. "Every time I breathe," she whispered, "someone's dissecting it online." Adrian placed a cup of tea on the table beside her. "Let them talk. Noise dies, truth lasts." She gave a bitter smile. "That's easy for you to say. You built an empire on silence." He crouched beside her, meeting her eyes. "And I'll use every part of that empire to protect you." But this time, I think the truth needs your voice, not mine. Grace looked away. I don't want fame. It's not fame, he said softly. It's reclamation. Downstairs, Hannah was soothing the babies, the soft whir of the sterilizer filling the nursery. The triplets had grown stronger, 3 tiny miracles with the same wide blue eyes as their mother. Grace listened to their coos echo faintly down the hallway, the sound both healing and haunting. Maya Chen arrived an hour later, carrying her laptop and exhaustion in equal measure. Jake's team is hinting at a documentary, she said. He's pitching himself as the father who lost everything. They're framing you as manipulative, unstable. Grace's stomach turned, and they'll believe him. Not if we get ahead of it, Maya said. We do 1 controlled interview, 1 appearance. You speak on your terms once, and then disappear back into your life. Adrian frowned. I don't want her paraded in front of cameras again. Grace shook her head. No, she's right. I can't hide forever. He turned me into a symbol of weakness. I need to show people who I really am. The next evening, Grace appeared on the Morning Pulse, a respected talk show known for quiet honesty rather than spectacle. She wore a simple ivory dress, her hair still thin from stress, her LVAD discreetly hidden beneath the fabric. Adrian waited backstage, fingers tight around a Mont Blanc pen he hadn't been able to stop clicking. The host leaned forward gently. Grace, the world has seen your tragedy through headlines. But tonight, it's your story. Why speak now? Grace took a slow breath. Because I almost died trying to give life, and when I came back, I found the world had rewritten my story for me. I was tired of being someone else's headline. Her voice trembled, but didn't break. She spoke about the pregnancy, the night she coded on the table, the stranger who became her husband to save her life. He didn't buy me, she said softly. He chose to stand between me and death when no one else did. The studio was silent. Even the host blinked back tears. When it aired the next morning, the internet changed tone. Hashtags flipped. Grace Miller Strom trended for 3 days. Donations flooded neonatal charities. Jake's sponsors dropped him overnight. In the quiet that followed, Grace stood at the nursery window watching the city wake. Adrian joined her, wrapping an arm gently around her shoulders. You changed the story, he murmured. She leaned against him. No, she said. I just took it back. And somewhere deep in that city, Jake Rowan watched the broadcast alone, realizing the woman he'd underestimated had finally beaten him, with nothing but truth. For the first time in months, the noise had stopped. Grace Miller woke before sunrise. The city below still half asleep, the hum of her LVAD blending with the faint rustle of wind against the window. In the nursery, 3 tiny chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm. She stood there barefoot, hair loose, a quiet strength replacing the fragile woman who'd once fought for every breath. The interview had changed everything. The world finally saw her truth. Not the rumor, not the scandal. Messages from women across the country filled her inbox. Mothers who'd survived near-death births, nurses who'd fought to save them, strangers who'd written, "You reminded me to keep going." Down the hallway, Adrian Hale was on a call, his tone composed but weary. "No, we're not doing any follow-up appearances," he told his assistant. "She's done enough. From now on, our silence is her protection." He hung up and stepped into the nursery doorway, watching her in the soft glow of morning. "You should be resting," he said gently. Grace smiled faintly. "You keep saying that like I know how." He walked closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to keep proving you're strong." She turned, eyes steady. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just learning how to live again." The words landed heavier than she intended. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city began to wake. Horns distant, coffee carts rolling into place. Later that day, Hannah arrived with groceries and her usual burst of energy. "Everyone at Starbucks is talking about you," she said, laughing. "One guy said you're the reason he called his mom." Grace rolled her eyes. "That's sweet, but I'd rather they forget me." "Not going to happen," Hannah teased. "You're officially an icon of survival." Adrian appeared from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, holding a mug of coffee. "And survival deserves breakfast," he said, placing plates on the table. For a few minutes, laughter filled the apartment, light, domestic, dangerously close to peace. But peace never lasted long in their story. Around noon, Maya Chen called with an update. "Jake's gone dark," she said. "No posts for a week, no appearances, but I don't like silence from men like him." It usually means he's planning something. Grace's smile faded. I don't want to hear his name anymore. I understand, Maya replied. But we'll stay alert. And Grace, congratulations. The hospital wants to name a new family ward after you. Donations tripled after your interview. Grace blinked, stunned. I don't deserve that. You earned it, Maya said simply. That evening, Grace ventured out for the first time. Wrapped in a long beige coat, she walked slowly through Central Park while Adrian pushed the stroller. The winter air was crisp. Leaves crunched underfoot. A few people recognized her but didn't approach, just quiet smiles, nods of respect. Near Bethesda Terrace, she stopped to rest, watching the fountains sparkle under fading sunlight. I used to walk here on my breaks from the hospital, she said. Back then, I'd see mothers with babies and wonder if I'd ever be one of them. Adrian looked at her softly. Now you're the one people wonder about. Grace chuckled. Let them. I finally have everything I wanted. The babies stirred, one tiny hand curling around Adrian's finger. He smiled faintly. Everything except rest. She laughed, brushing her hair from her face. Maybe someday. For a moment, time stood still. Just two people and three miracles, surrounded by a city that finally stopped watching long enough to let them breathe. But miles away in a cheap motel outside Queens, Jake Rowan stared at a blank screen on his laptop and the unfinished email titled, My Truth. The silence was ending again. The first snow of winter fell over Manhattan like ash, soft and deceptive. Grace Miller was in the kitchen, humming softly as she warmed bottles, the triplets cooing in their bassinets near the window. It felt like peace, fragile, borrowed, real. But peace in her world never lasted. Hannah entered, phone in hand, face pale. Grace, she said quietly, you need to see this. On the screen, Jake Rowan's face filled a live stream window. He looked gaunt, unshaven, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The title read, My Truth, What They Don't Want You to Know. He spoke directly into the camera. They called me a monster. They said I left her to die. But they don't know what that billionaire did. He used her, made her sign her life away while she was unconscious. She never wanted him. Grace's knees weakened. Turn it off, she whispered. But Hannah hesitated. Wait, he's saying he has proof. On screen, Jake held up a printed marriage certificate. See this? He said. She didn't sign it. Look at the handwriting. That's not hers. Adrian entered from the hall, his expression sharpening as soon as he saw the video. He's bluffing, he said calmly. We had a court witness. The signature was valid. He's spinning it, Maya Chen said through speakerphone minutes later. He's framing you as the victim of coercion. If this catches fire again, it'll drag you both back into the spotlight. Grace gripped the edge of the counter, the LVAD humming louder under her ribs. I can't do this again, she whispered. I just wanted quiet. Adrian touched her shoulder gently. Then we fight smart this time. Not louder, smarter. Maya's voice hardened. He's playing public sympathy. If we respond with denial, it feeds him. We need proof stronger than his lies. Let's remind the world who signed the medical consent that saved your life. Hospitals keep digital records, timestamps, witness logs. Grace nodded slowly, the fear in her chest beginning to shift into resolve. Find them, she said. By nightfall, the hospital's legal department confirmed it. Grace's fingerprint authorization on the emergency tablet, her sister's witness signature, and Dr. Patel's attestation, all time-stamped minutes before the surgery. Solid evidence. But Jake wasn't done. Hours later, his video racked up 500,000 views. His tone turned venomous. He took my kids, he took my family, but I'm taking something back. Her truth. Grace's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in, some hateful, some kind. Why don't you speak up? Did he force you? Are you okay? Adrian took her phone and powered it off. You owe no one answers tonight, he said softly, but Grace shook her head. No. I owe my children peace, and peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. The next morning, they met Maya in her Park Avenue office. The windows framed the skyline, the snow turning everything outside into a quiet white painting. Grace looked small in her beige coat, but her voice was clear. We released the documents publicly, she said. No interviews, no drama, just the facts. He used attention to destroy me. I'll use truth to end him. Maya smiled slightly. Now you're thinking like a strategist. That afternoon, Hale Systems' legal division released a single statement with 3 attachments: the marriage certificate, the hospital's emergency authorization log, and a notarized confirmation from Dr. Patel. No commentary, no press, just truth. By evening, Jake's livestream had been taken down, his account suspended for defamatory claims. Sponsors vanished overnight. Grace sat on the couch, baby sleeping on her lap, watching the snow fall outside. "He won't stop," she said softly. Adrian looked at her, eyes warm but tired. "Maybe not. But now he's screaming into a void and the world's finally stopped listening." Outside, the storm thickened, but inside their apartment, the only sound left was the steady living heartbeat of peace returning. By February, the snow had melted into gray puddles, and Manhattan's skyline shimmered under pale sunlight. Grace Miller stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the soft navy gown that Adrian had insisted she wear to the Hale Systems charity gala. Her reflections still startled her sometimes, the thin scar along her collarbone where the LVAD line entered her chest, the quiet hum she could feel beneath her skin. She wasn't used to the mirror showing survival instead of fragility. "Are you sure about this?" Hannah asked, handing her a silver clutch. "You don't owe anyone appearances." Grace smiled faintly. "It's not about appearances. The donations tonight go to heart failure research. If I can stand for 5 minutes to help save someone else, I will." Adrian entered the room, crisp black tuxedo, eyes full of concern. "If you get tired, we leave. No press lines, no speeches." She shook her head gently. "I'll speak. Not for them, for Dr. Patel's patients, for every woman who didn't get a second chance." Hours later, the Plaza Hotel glittered under chandeliers and camera flashes. Guests arrived in sleek cars, laughter echoing through marble halls. The media buzzed about the billionaire's miraculous wife, but Adrian kept his hand at the small of her back, his silent promise that she'd never face it alone. The gala opened with a slideshow of the hospital's work, images of premature babies, tired parents, doctors in scrubs. When Grace's photo appeared, the room fell quiet. She was the living face of the cause. Dr. Patel took the podium first, her voice steady. Medicine saved her heart, but courage kept it beating. Then she gestured toward Grace. "Please welcome the reason we believe in miracles." Applause thundered as Grace stepped forward. The LVAD hummed beneath her dress, steady as a drumbeat. Her palms were slick, but her eyes were clear. "A few months ago," she began, "I thought my story ended on an operating table. But life, like the heart, sometimes restarts when you least expect it." She paused, glancing at Adrian in the front row. "This machine keeps me alive, but it's not what defines me. What defines me is the chance to raise my children, to tell them that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength." The crowd rose in ovation. For one perfect moment, everything was light. Then a voice sliced through the applause. "Beautiful speech, Grace. Did your husband write it for you?" Every head turned. Jake Rowan stood near the back, uninvited, in a wrinkled suit, eyes glassy with something stronger than courage. Security moved immediately, but he raised his hands. "Relax, I just came to congratulate my family." Grace's heart skipped. "Jake, don't do this," he sneered. "You think you can erase me with your fancy charity and your billionaire husband? Those are my kids, my story." Adrian rose slowly, calm but deadly. "You're trespassing. Leave now before you make it worse." Jake laughed bitterly. "Worse? You already took everything from me." His voice cracked. "All I wanted was to be their father." Grace's voice trembled but didn't break. "Then you should have been one when they needed you." Security closed in. Jake's shoulders sagged, his defiance crumbling into something almost human. "You think you won," he muttered, "but you'll never escape what you did." He was escorted out, flashes popping like fireworks behind him. The room buzzed with whispers, tension hanging like smoke. Grace exhaled, her hand clutching the podium. "I'm sorry," she said softly to the crowd. "Real healing isn't always quiet." Applause rose again, gentler this time, but deeper. Backstage, Adrian wrapped his arms around her. "You didn't just survive tonight," he whispered. "You took your life back." And outside the plaza, as the cameras turned off, Jake Rowan disappeared into the cold, the city swallowing the last of his pride and his noise. The morning after the gala, every headline in New York screamed her name again. Grace Miller's miracle interrupted by drunken ex. Billionaire's wife faces her past. Charity chaos at the plaza. Photos of Jake being dragged out by security filled the internet. Grace sat at the kitchen counter, robe wrapped tight, scrolling in silence, each image cut deeper than the last. Adrian set a cup of coffee beside her. "Don't look," he said gently. She didn't answer. He made me look like a fool again. You looked strong, Adrian replied. They saw the difference between grace and disgrace. She gave a small bitter laugh. Nice line, you should trademark it. Before he could respond, Maya Chen called, her voice clipped but calm. Damage control in progress. Most outlets are turning against him. One journalist wants to do a follow-up piece focusing on the donation surge after your speech. Grace rubbed her temple. I don't want another article. I just want him gone. That might be sooner than you think, Maya said. Jake violated his restraining order by entering that gala. The DA is reviewing charges, but there's something else. Cole Bennett reached out. He found something you should see. An hour later, Cole arrived at the penthouse. He carried a manila envelope and the quiet exhaustion of a man who'd seen too much. It's over, he's setting the file on the table. Jake's been working with a media agent named Carla Denton. She's been paying him to keep stirring drama. Every post, every stunt, it's all orchestrated. Adrian frowned. Why? Clicks, Cole said simply. Her platform thrives on outrage, and Jake was her golden goose. Grace flipped through the documents, emails, wire transfers, contracts with signatures. One line stood out, keep the story alive at all costs. Her chest tightened. So all of this wasn't just him? Cole shook his head. He's still responsible, but he had help. The network fed his ego until it consumed him. Grace exhaled slowly, the betrayal cutting deep. He sold his soul, and they sold mine with it. Maya arrived moments later to review the evidence. This is enough for a civil suit and criminal charges. We can end his public career permanently. Adrian looked at Grace. Do you want that? She hesitated. I don't know. Part of me wants peace, the other wants justice. Then get both, Maya said. Justice is peace with a paper trail. That afternoon, Grace met with the DA's office via video call. Her voice was calm as she recounted everything, his threats, his lies, his intrusion at the hospital and gala. When she finished, the prosecutor nodded. We'll handle it from here. That night, she stood by the window again, the city glittering below. Adrian joined her, placing a soft hand on her back. You don't have to fight anymore, he murmured. She shook her head. You're wrong. I have to fight for the woman who almost died, for the one who couldn't speak. I owe her that. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You're not the same person I found in that hospital bed. No, she said softly. I'm stronger and sadder, but still here. A knock interrupted them. Hannah peeked in, smiling shyly. Dr. Patel called. She said the hospital finished the new neonatal ward. They're naming it the Miller-Hale Wing. Grace's eyes filled instantly. They did. Adrian smiled. You changed more lives than you know. Grace looked out the window again, voice barely a whisper. Then maybe that's enough redemption, for both of us. But somewhere downtown, in a dim bar lit by the blue glow of a laptop screen, Jake Rowan watched the news of his arrest warrant break. And this time, there were no cameras left to save him. The news broke just after dawn. Jake Rowan, arrested in defamation and extortion scandal. The headlines splashed across every screen. The same man who once chased fame, now handcuffed outside his apartment. Grace Miller watched the footage in silence from her living room, her robe loosely tied, her coffee untouched. The camera caught his face, angry, wild, not yet realizing it was over. Do you feel anything? Hannah asked softly, sitting beside her. Grace shook her head. I wish I did. Relief, maybe. But all I see is the man who almost made me hate myself. Adrian entered, phone in hand. Maya just confirmed he's being held without bail. The DA's office added charges for harassment and privacy violations. They found messages between him and that agent. It's airtight. Grace nodded absently, eyes still fixed on the TV. Jake shouted something to the cameras before being shoved into the car. The microphones caught his last words. She was mine before she was his. The anchor's voice faded beneath the hum of the LVAD in her chest. Grace turned off the TV. He'll never stop claiming ownership, even now. Adrian sat across from her. That's what men like him do. They mistake possession for love. She looked up, her voice steady. And what about you? He didn't hesitate. I don't possess you, Grace. I stand beside you. The silence that followed was softer than before, less awkward, more fragile. Later that morning, Maya arrived with a folder. It's over legally, she said, setting it down. But the press will feed off this for another week. My advice? Leave the city for a while. Let the noise burn itself out. Where? Grace asked. Adrian smiled faintly. The Hamptons. The house near the dunes, it's private. Quiet, the air will help you breathe again. Grace hesitated, glancing at the babies asleep in their carriers. It sounds perfect. That evening, they drove east in silence. The city lights faded into highway lamps, then into open sky. Grace watched the skyline disappear in the rearview mirror, feeling the strange peace of leaving her old life behind. The triplets slept soundly, bundled in blankets. Adrian kept one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally brushing hers. When they arrived, the house stood alone among whispering pines facing the Atlantic. The sea stretched endlessly, gray and alive. Grace stepped outside, the wind tangling her hair. For the first time in months, there were no cameras, no headlines, just the rhythmic sound of waves. "This feels unreal," she murmured. Adrian smiled. "Real doesn't always mean noisy." Days passed quietly. Grace read in the mornings, fed the babies by the window, and walked along the sand in the afternoons with Hannah. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. Life felt clean again, simple, rhythmic, almost ordinary. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Grace stood barefoot at the water's edge. Adrian joined her, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you in that hospital bed, I thought saving you would fix me somehow. But it didn't. It just showed me what love really costs." She looked at him. "And what's that?" "Everything," he said simply, "but it's worth it." Grace smiled, the wind carrying her hair across her face. "Then maybe it's time I stop surviving and start living again." He reached for her hand. "Together?" "Together," she whispered. Behind them, the house lights glowed warm against the dusk. Inside, the triplets stirred, tiny sounds blending with the sea. Grace closed her eyes, feeling her heart, part machine, part miracle, beating in perfect time with the waves. And somewhere far away, in a cold cell under flickering light, Jake Rowan finally faced silence. And for the first time, it terrified him. The peace at the Hamptons' home lasted only 3 weeks. Then, one cold March morning, Grace Miller woke to the familiar weight pressing against her chest, the slow, suffocating pressure that once announced her heart was failing. She tried to breathe, but the air felt sharp. The LVAD's hum sputtered for a second before returning to rhythm. "Adrian," she whispered, clutching the bedsheet. He was at her side instantly, pulling her upright. "You okay?" "I think. Something's wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "It feels different." Within an hour they were back in the city, racing through the doors of New York Presbyterian. The same halls, the same sterile smell, only this time she wasn't dying. She was fighting not to. Dr. Patel appeared, concern shadowing her normally steady eyes. "You did the right thing coming in," she said. "We'll run tests immediately." Hannah arrived soon after, breathless from the train. "You promised you'd rest," she scolded softly. Grace managed a weak smile. "Guess I'm bad at promises." Adrian stayed silent, his hand never leaving hers. When Dr. Patel returned, her voice was gentle but serious. "You have an infection near the LVAD site. It's treatable, but we'll need IV antibiotics and complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. Grace exhaled shakily. "So I'm not dying?" "Not if we stay ahead of it," the doctor said firmly. "But you can't take another setback like before. Your body's strong, but it's still recovering." That night, as the monitors beeped softly in the dark, Grace stared at the ceiling, frustration burning behind her eyes. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate being fragile." Adrian sat beside her, reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, the pages worn from use. "Even the strongest men fell apart sometimes," he said quietly. The difference was, they stood up again. She glanced at the book. "You still read that?" "Every night," he said. "It reminds me that control is an illusion, but choice isn't." She smiled faintly. "You and your philosophy. Me and my hope," he corrected. Meanwhile, news of Jake Rowan's arrest had finally begun to fade. His trial date was set for late spring, but the media had lost interest. Grace's story had outgrown scandal. It had become something else. Cole Bennett's column titled, "The Woman Who Outlived Her Own Headline" went viral, painting her not as a victim, but as a survivor, redefining strength. When Dr. Patel checked on her the next morning, Grace was propped up in bed, sketching the triplets' faces from memory on a hospital notepad. "You don't stop, do you?" the doctor asked, smiling. Grace shrugged. "If I stop, I start thinking." Dr. Patel adjusted the IV drip. "Thinking isn't bad. Fear is. You're allowed to live without waiting for the next crisis." That evening, Hannah brought the babies to the hospital for a short visit. Grace held Eden first, tears slipping down her cheeks as the baby grabbed her finger. "You saved me again," she whispered. From across the room, Adrian watched the scene quietly, his heart full and breaking at the same time. He'd faced countless crises in boardrooms, but this, watching her fight her own body, was the hardest battle he'd ever stood beside. When visiting hours ended, he lingered until the nurses dimmed the lights. Grace looked at him sleepily. "You should go home." He shook his head. "I'm exactly where I need to be." She smiled faintly, voice soft as a breath. "You always are." As she drifted to sleep, the Elvad hummed in steady time. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet and slow, covering the city in white. And as Adrian watched her breathe, he realized the truth. Love wasn't about saving someone once. It was about staying when they needed saving again. Spring arrived quietly in New York, the trees along Riverside Drive shaking off their frost as if nothing terrible had ever happened. Grace Miller's infection had healed, though her body still carried the heaviness of recovery. She'd been home for 2 weeks now, her life settling into soft routines, feeding the triplets, short walks through Central Park, long evenings with Adrian reading by her side. Peace, for once, seemed possible. Then the letter came. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from the State Correctional Facility in Queens. Hannah brought it in with the morning mail, her face tight. "You don't have to open it," she said, setting it on the counter. Grace stared at it for a long time, fingers trembling slightly. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, impatient, Jake's. "He found a way to speak, even from a cell," she whispered. Adrian looked up from the couch. "You don't owe him a single word." "Grace." "I know," she said softly, "but I need to hear it, whatever it is. Otherwise it'll haunt me." She broke the seal carefully. The letter inside was short, written in jagged ink. "Grace, you think you won, but you'll always be the girl who needed saving. I was wrong about many things, but not about us. You can't erase history. When the cameras move on, he'll get bored. They always do. And when that happens, remember who knew you before the money, before the pity. Me. Jake." Grace's chest tightened, the words digging into old wounds she thought had closed. She handed the letter to Adrian. He read it once, jaw tightening, then quietly tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. "He's still trying to control you," he said. "Even locked up." Grace looked out the window. "He doesn't control me, not anymore. But I want to understand why men like him never stop trying." Adrian sighed. Because letting go would mean admitting they lost someone better than themselves. Later that day, Grace took the babies for a walk through Central Park. The sky was pale blue, the kind of fragile color that felt like hope. A few strangers recognized her, nodding politely, no cameras, just quiet respect. She sat on a bench near the lake, Eden asleep in her arms, and thought about Jake's words. Once she might have believed them. Once she was the girl who needed saving. But now, watching her children's small breaths, she knew better. That night, when Adrian returned from a meeting, he found her at the kitchen table, writing. The torn pieces of Jake's letter sat beside her. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Finishing the conversation," she said without looking up. She wrote slowly, carefully, every stroke deliberate. "Jake, you were right about one thing. I can't erase history, but I can build a future without it. I don't hate you, I pity you. Because while you chased attention, I found peace. While you performed love, I learned it. And the difference between us is simple. I got better, you didn't." She signed it, then folded the page and set it in the envelope. Adrian frowned. "You're not sending that, are you?" Grace smiled faintly. "No, this letter's for me." She placed it in a drawer, locking it away. "That chapter's closed." He stepped closer, kissing her forehead. "You keep surprising me. Get used to it." She teased softly. Outside, the city glowed under the first hints of summer. The triplets slept peacefully, their soft breathing filling the quiet apartment. Grace stood by the window, watching the lights blur into gold. And somewhere across the river, Jake Rowan read his own words in a prison cell, and for the first time they sounded like a confession instead of a victory. It was a clear May evening when the city finally felt alive again. Central Park was bursting with green, and the air smelled like second chances. Grace Miller pushed the stroller down a quiet path, the triplets cooing softly beneath their sun hats. Beside her walked Adrian Hale, dressed simply for once. No suit, no armor, just a man who'd learned that love wasn't something to manage. Feels strange, Grace said, smiling as the babies giggled. To walk without someone watching us. Adrian nodded. Strange but good. I like the quiet. They stopped near Bethesda Terrace where the fountain glimmered beneath the sinking sun. Grace lifted Eden into her arms, rocking her gently. She has your calm, Adrian said. Grace laughed. And your stubbornness. You both get that look when things don't go your way. He smiled. You've noticed? For a moment the air was still, peaceful, like a world rebuilt after a storm. Then Adrian reached into his pocket, his movements nervous in a way she'd never seen. Grace, he began, do you remember the night I married you? She glanced at him, puzzled. How could I forget? I was unconscious. Exactly. His voice softened. That wasn't a marriage. It was a decision made out of fear and necessity. It saved your life, but it didn't honor who you are. You deserved a choice then. So I'm asking you now, with every heartbeat that's truly yours, will you choose me this time? Grace's breath caught. He opened his palm, revealing not a diamond but a delicate gold band engraved with 3 tiny initials, M, E, and T. Miles, Eden, Theo, their children's names. She blinked back tears. You're serious? As serious as a man who almost lost you twice, he said. I don't want the headline version of us. I want the Tuesday mornings, the spilled coffee, the late-night feedings. I want boring with you. Grace laughed through her tears. You have no idea how unromantic that sounds. He grinned. Perfect, isn't it? The triplets babbled in the stroller as if cheering him on. Grace looked at the ring, then at the man who'd stood beside her through every scar, every silence, every storm. Adrian, she whispered, you never saved me. You reminded me I was worth saving. She took the ring, slipping it onto her finger. Yes, but not because I owe you, because I love you. He exhaled, relief breaking into a rare, genuine smile. He leaned forward, kissing her gently, the world fading into gold and wind and soft laughter. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, so what now? He pointed toward the stroller. Now, diaper duty. Romance comes later. She burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the terrace. Nearby, an elderly couple smiled, watching them. You two just starting out? The woman asked kindly. Grace nodded. Something like that. As the sun sank behind the skyline, they walked toward the bridge, the baby's giggles blending with the city's heartbeat. For once, Grace didn't feel like she was surviving a story. She was writing one. Later that night, after the babies were asleep and the city had gone quiet, Adrian found her on the balcony, gazing at the stars. You know, she said softly, I used to pray for a miracle. Then I realized miracles aren't lightning bolts, they're choices. The small ones that keep you alive. He slipped his arm around her waist. Then tonight was our miracle. Grace leaned against him, eyes shining. No, she whispered. Tonight was the beginning of everything after. And as the moon rose above the skyline, their vows, born once out of fear, finally became something real. A promise freely chosen, written not in ink, but in forgiveness. The summer heat pressed down on Manhattan like a weight. The air shimmered above the streets, and the tabloids that once printed Grace Miller's name now lay forgotten in convenient store racks. Life had moved forward for almost everyone, except Jake Rowan. From his cell at Rikers Island, Jake stared through the narrow window at the skyline he once believed would make him famous. Days bled together, quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clang of gates. He'd stopped counting how many nights he'd spent replaying everything. His downfall, his lies, the way the world turned its back. A guard approached the bars. Mail, Rowan. Jake took the envelope reluctantly. It wasn't from Grace. He recognized the lawyer's crisp handwriting, Maya Chen. Inside was a single sheet. Mr. Rowan, this is to inform you that Miss Grace Miller has decided not to testify further in your case. She believes justice has been served. There will be no civil pursuit, no additional charges. She wishes you peace, not punishment. Below that, in Grace's handwriting, was a single line. Let go before it destroys what's left of you. Jake sank back on the cot, the words echoing louder than any sentence a judge could give. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, just emptiness. The silence he'd once chased now felt like suffocation. Meanwhile, across the city, Grace was walking along the East River with Adrian and the babies. The breeze carried the scent of salt and summer jasmine. She pushed the stroller slowly, her hair tied back, her smile easy. It's strange, she said softly. When I think of him now, I don't feel hate anymore, just distance. Adrian nodded. That's freedom. Grace looked at him, sunlight flickering through the leaves. Freedom feels quieter than I imagined. He smiled. That's the point. Later that afternoon, Maya visited their apartment with final paperwork. Jake's lawyer accepted the plea deal, she said. 18 months with mandatory counseling. His media contracts are void. He's bankrupt. Grace exhaled slowly. So it's really over? Maya smiled. As over as things get in this city. When Maya left, Hannah came over to babysit, insisting Grace and Adrian go out for dinner. You two haven't been on a date since the last scandal ended, she teased. They ended up at the River Cafe, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. The golden light from the skyline shimmered across the water, reflections dancing against the glass walls. Grace wore a pale blue dress, the same shade as the sky before dawn. Over dinner they didn't talk about lawsuits or hospitals, only little things. Music. The baby's learning to sit up. Adrian's ridiculous attempt at making pancakes. For the first time in what felt like forever, they laughed freely. When dessert arrived, Grace leaned back, watching the city lights ripple. You know, she said, a year ago I thought my life was over. Adrian reached for her hand. And now? Now it feels like it's finally beginning. He squeezed her fingers. You earned this peace. She smiled. We both did. Back at Rikers, Jake lay awake long after lights out. In his mind, Grace's voice replayed from that hospital corridor, the moment she'd screamed, "Don't you dare leave them." It haunted him, not as accusation, but as memory of what he could have been. He closed his eyes, whispering to the darkness, I let go. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, and miles away, in a quiet apartment filled with the soft breaths of sleeping children, Grace stirred awake just long enough to whisper into the dark, Thank you, God, for letting me finish what you started. And for the first time since it all began, both of them, sinner and survivor, finally stopped fighting the past. 1 year to the day after the night that changed everything, New York bloomed in late summer gold. Central Park shimmered beneath sunlight, the skyline reflecting across the water like memory meeting the present. Grace Miller stood in front of a mirror at the River Cafe, her hands trembling, not from weakness this time, but from wonder. The woman in the reflection was alive, whole, a mother, a survivor, and now by choice, a bride again. Hannah adjusted the lace at Grace's shoulder. You look like peace, she whispered. Grace smiled softly. That's the first time anyone's ever said that about me. Downstairs, Adrian Hale waited by the garden archway overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. He wore a simple gray suit, no tie, his hair touched by the wind. Beside him, Dr. Patel held the rings, a quiet witness to everything she'd helped save. Maya Chen stood nearby with Cole Bennett, who insisted on documenting the moment, but not for the papers, just for them. When Grace stepped into the garden, the guests rose. It wasn't a crowd of elites or celebrities, just the people who'd carried her through the storm. Nurses, lawyers, friends, family. Adrian's breath caught when he saw her. She wasn't fragile anymore. She was radiant, steady, every step deliberate. As she reached him, he whispered, You took my breath the first time I saw you. Now you give it back. She laughed quietly. You and your lines. The officiant cleared his throat with a smile. We are gathered here not to witness a rescue, but a renewal, a love born not from fear, but from faith. The ceremony was simple. The air smelled of river and roses, and for once there was no hum of cameras, no flashing bulbs, only the sound of the wind through the trees. Grace held his hands and spoke first. A year ago, I didn't know if I'd live long enough to say goodbye. Now I get to say forever. You stood beside me when the world thought I was done. You didn't save me. You reminded me I could still fight. So I promised to keep fighting, with you, and for the life we're still building. Adrian's voice trembled when he replied. I used to believe success was measured in deals and numbers. But the night I signed your name on that hospital form, I learned what value really is. It's breath. It's faith. It's love. I promised to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve the moment you said yes. When the officiant said, You may now kiss your wife, the applause came like sunlight breaking through clouds. Afterward, the reception spilled into the terrace. The triplets, now toddling in white outfits, were passed from arm to arm like tiny miracles. Hannah toasted with sparkling cider. to my sister, who turned pain into purpose, and to Adrian, who finally learned to smile. Laughter rippled through the crowd. As the sun sank, painting the water in gold, Grace stepped away for a moment, standing at the railing. The city's hum rose faintly below, but she no longer felt part of its chaos. Adrian joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he said, "but not with fear, with gratitude." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "Funny how the worst day of my life gave me everything that matters." He kissed her temple. "That's what survival looks like." In the distance, the bridge lights flickered on, one by one, like blessings. The babies giggled behind them, and the sound felt like music. Grace took a deep breath, eyes glistening. "It's over, isn't it?" Adrian smiled. "No," he said softly. "It's just beginning." And as the city that once broke her now stood glittering beneath her feet, Grace Miller finally had what she'd been denied all along. Not a miracle, but a life worth living. So, that's how our story ends. But hey, my wonderful friends, you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed until this moment, it means something in Grace's journey touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you that pain doesn't have to be permanent, that even the darkest nights can give birth to light. Like Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Grace's life wasn't about perfection. It was about courage, the courage to face what breaks you and turn it into what builds you. We all fall, we all lose, but what defines us is how we stand back up slower, wiser, and still open to love. That's healing, that's real strength. So tonight, take a breath, forgive yourself, believe that you too can rewrite your story just like Grace did. If this story reached you even just a little, give it a like, share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope is still alive, and subscribe to our channel, because here we tell stories not just to watch but to feel.